People keep saying that Mech isn't viable in Legacy of the Void. I admit, guys, I've been one of them. Even I've been caught saying things like, it's just hard countered by Vipers. Mortals and Chargers just roll over the top. It's just impossible to be reliable with this style. Well, recently at IAM, Gumiho beat Dark with this style. Bunny and Ryung also did a similar style, and they looked incredibly powerful with it. So I'm starting to be convinced that this isn't just a one-off surprise strategy. And the coolest thing about it is it relies on one of the little used, newish upgrades in Legacy of the Void.
Engine screaming.
Gonna be hearing that line a hell of a lot because it is gonna be a Banshee speed opening. That's right, Hyperflight rotors, for those who aren't too familiar with the upgrade names. It makes Banshees almost as fast as Mutalisks, and that's a big part of how this style works so well. Like most successful mech styles, you're going to be exerting a lot of very heavy mobile pressure in the early game, and you don't want to just kind of let Zerg calmly build up a big economy, scout, and respond in their own time. The aim is to use early Banshees, Hellions, and then speed Banshees in quite heavy numbers to really just harass from all angles, throw the Zerg off balance, mess up their build order, and potentially do completely massive damage and just tear apart their drone lines and give yourself a massive lead. So, why is this so powerful into Mech? Well, I think part of the reason is that the smooth transition from hyper-aggressive Hellion Banshee all over the place, it just smoothly goes into Mech a lot better because, well, you want the factory and the starport to continue producing to keep you safe in the follow-up. If you go very heavy at Hellion Banshee into bio, you do delay your bio upgrades by a long time. There's usually a bit of a window where you're trying to swap from Hellions over to Marines, where it's a little bit awkward. Yet, if you get just a few siege tanks or Thors out, they mesh very well with the early Hellions and Banshees, and the transition just feels overall a hell of a lot smoother. So one thing to focus on if you guys are going to start doing this build at home, by the way, is your success will rely heavily on your execution of the early pressure. So if you're not playing against Dark, don't worry, you don't need to do it as well as we're going to see Gumiho do it here, where he's bouncing around with 2 squads of Banshees and Hellions, microing them all perfectly. But you will need to focus on really improving your first, 7-8 minutes of the game, trying to do bits of damage with pressure without just throwing your units away, while keeping your macro up at home. For anyone who's interested in the exact build order notes of this style, he does the exact same build order in game number 2 as well, which I'll be talking about from the other side of the equation tomorrow. And the build order notes are down below in the YouTube comments, and they're also posted in Twitch chat. So let's take a look, by the way. Already we can see interesting building placement from Gumiho. He's just going to make it really hard here for Dark to scout what's going on. Dark's going to come in and he's like, yo, where's the barracks, man? What is happening? And the Marine's just going to come over and shoo that away, saying, if you want to see what I'm up to, you will need to sacrifice Overlords. You'll need to pay for it. And this is really cool. He also doesn't SCV scout at all. This is a little bit risky, but Gumiho is a very high-level player. When he gets there, he sees the hatchery is not done, and he immediately knows it must be a pull first. So he's pulled a single SCV down here with a Marine, and he's going to try to use that SCV to buffer and the Marine to deal with the 2 Zerglings. However, he mismicros a little bit and takes a little bit too much damage on this first SCV, so he is going to lose an SCV for his trouble. I would recommend you guys pull 2 SCVs, just because you're probably going to make the mistake Gumiho did just there. I know I would. Every single time I see 2 Zerglings, I'm fighting it with 1 Marine, I'm going to pull 2 SCVs, just to make sure. If it's 4 or 6 Zerglings, well, it's going to be a little bit dicier, and you probably want to pull 4 to 6 SCVs. Maybe you just want to SCV scout if it's common for people to go pull first and build 6 Zerglings, and just adjust the build slightly to adapt to that. We are going to see some Zerglings looking for a little bit of damage, but notice here that Gumiho is just building Hellions out of a factory with no add-on, and what he actually did was he built the tech lab on the barracks after that Marine, and then he just swapped it off and built the starport immediately on the tech lab. So this is the fastest possible Cloak and Banshee you can get off an expand build. And that's really cool and very important to the build. Dark is finally going to come in and see it, but he had to invest in Overlord speed. This is not free for Dark, and that's a pattern we're going to see with this build, is you don't give information away for free. You're going to be doing very mobile, somewhat surprising, very fast-paced harassment, So you want to try and deny your opponent's vision as much as possible. These Hellions and these Reapers haven't been trying to get damage, they've just been denying Zerglings from coming in and scouting, from coming in and doing their own damage. And this first Banshee is going to beeline immediately across the map. Now, this Banshee is so fast, like I said, Dark's actually going to have Spore Crawlers down at what is even earlier than the normal safe timing. Normally I tell players, drop them at 4 minutes 30. A Cloaked Banshee will never get there before Spore Crawlers that start at 4 minutes 30 finish. But, as I said, just this little change up in the build order, getting the Banshee here a few seconds earlier, means the Banshee gets in, and that Spore Crawler's not quite done, gets to pick off a couple of drones. By no means do you need to kill units with every single wave of pressure, but across the Hellion run-bys, the Banshees poking in and out, you do start to find many, many opportunities, and you need to get at least a few drone kills across some of those. You can see the Viking now is clearing up all the Overlords on the map. He really wants to hide the follow-up. Why is that? Oh, he still doesn't have more production down. He's just building more Hellions. He ended up building a reactor after that tech lab with the barracks, and then he swapped the factory onto it. So now he has 7 Hellions and a Reaper. And notice he's really just clearing up the map vision. Look at his units. They're spreading all over the place. The Viking is as well. He wants to push Dark's vision back into his corner of the map so that he can surprise him, so that he can come from all sorts of surprising angles. Behind this, there's a 3rd CC going down. He dropped the double gas on his natural, and he's a little bit slow to put his SCVs on there. He catches this Overlord of Dark. Dark's like, I should scout what his follow-up is. And Gumi's just like, nope, you will see nothing this entire game. And look at these Hellions that have worked their way all the way around that very far north side of the map. And they're just going to, give themselves the maximum opportunity to get some harassment damage. Dark's pretty well positioned here. He is a very safe, very careful player. But nonetheless, these Hellions are going to come in, and they're going to get quite a couple of drones. This is almost disastrous for Dark. But this Queen, look at that Queen. Oh my god, that Queen block. I can't believe the Hellions couldn't slip past her. So that was actually a sick little save there. But at the end of the day, it's still 13 drones killed. And you can see that the worker count's very similar. And now, suddenly, guess what? Hyperflight Rotors is getting close to done. He pulled the Queens out of position. Dark was being greedy and didn't build a Spore here. He was relying on Queens and an Overseer. And he loses another 8 workers because of that. And guess what? Dark has no idea that Hyperflight Rotors is on the way. He's like, yeah, 2 Banshees, that's pretty normal. He has no idea we've got Banshee speed. More and more Banshees are building. And because Gumiho is putting on so much aggression and Dark hasn't really tried to do any counter pressure, Gumiho already has a 3rd landed. He's immediately taking gases as soon as he lands this 3rd. And he's only now finally starting to add on extra factories. This is why you need to do a bit of damage in the early game. This is why you need to make sure you get value out of these early units. At the very least, clearing up creep and map vision, but definitely looking for some drone kills as well. It's because you really don't get out tanks and Thors for such a long time. So yeah, it's a very harassment-focused style. But look at this. 2 Banshees on the south, 2 Banshees on the north, both with speed. Hellions in the middle, clearing up a little bit of creep. And this is just a great maneuver by Gumiho. Let's put it on Gumi's camera so you guys can really see how he does micro everything. And you can see just there, you can almost always just get out of there with those Banshees very easily. He's going to keep going around. Behind this, you'll also notice he's actually put down missile turrets. And this is interesting. If you're going Banshees, a lot of players do like to go Spire to get rid of the Banshees, but especially once they see Banshee speed, because these Banshees can constantly fly in and out, a lot of Zergs will drop a Spire and get either Corruptors or Mutalisks. So you can see that Gumi is just like mega safe. He's like, there's always a chance that I miss the Spire. I don't have 100% scouting all the time, even though I'm harassing a lot. He's like, I'll just build missile turrets. And he gets those down right around that 7-minute mark. And he even builds 2 Thors here before going up to siege tanks or any other units. So you can see Gumi's like, alright, let's make sure that I'm safe against any big muta transition, and then I'll go into the tanks and so on. He's got +2 vehicle weapons on the way. 2nd armory is down, which he'll start plating on, and the 4th and 5th factory. So he's finally getting into this big mech setup where he can pump out lots of units. And the 4th command center is going down. But right now, where's the mech army? He doesn't really have that standard mech army. He's been playing this first stage of the game, which is very harassment focused. It's all about, clearing up the creep, denying the map vision, poking in and doing damage. And look at this map vision of his. He's always making sure there's no way that he can be surprised by counterattacks. And he's really just pushing back Dark's vision into his corner of the map. I think this is especially perfect because it's Newkirk Precinct. The bases are quite spread out. There's, reasonably wide angles to counterattack on. And look at that. the Banshees can just engage right into the Queens. Luckily, those Hydralisks were there just in time. If they weren't there, all of those Queens would have got blasted down. Once you get to 6 or 7 Banshees, they can just annihilate Queens. They can ignore Spore Crawlers and just focus them down almost instantly. Banshee DPS is actually one of the highest in the game. They deal so much damage. Though heavily armored units do slow down their damage a lot. So Ultralisks are the one unit which are kind of immune to Banshees. At this point, we're going to see Gumi kind of go into a much more standard mech style that you guys would be a little bit more familiar with. He's still got the Banshees out, which is nice, but hey, Blue Flame's on the way, 3 tanks building at a time, few Hellions, mixing in some Thors here and there. And he's just going to try to get out a really sick, maxed out mech army and take it from there. If he can get out that big tank Thor force, you know, force a fight before there's like enough Vipers or Broodlords or anything to deal with it, then he'll be in a really good spot. These Banshees are going to continue to look for damage, and notice he's like, oh, 3 Spores and 2 Queens. Yeah, I don't need to attack into that. But if there were no Queens there, he definitely could have isolated those Spore Crawlers one at a time and fought them. Of course, you're always going to have excess minerals with Mech because you're spending so much gas. So he starts putting down extra command centers. He's something I do wish he did, which he doesn't do this game, is clear these rocks. This is something where whenever you're sitting idle in the mid game with your army guys, always clear up these rocks. This is something players often they would love to take a base here when the game gets messy, but because the rocks are still there and they can't move their units down later on, that can really screw them over. I'd say that's like, it's a small thing, but it can actually affect the outcome of a game. It can actually make a pretty big difference. Something else we should point out, I mean, sure, Gumiho, we're watching on his camera, right? He's continually poking, counterattacking, he's looking for bits of damage. Once again, Hellbat's running up here, he's got 2-speed Banshees. But I also want to pay attention to the SCV count. He's at 73 SCVs, so I'll talk about that in just a moment. Once again, squad of 2 Banshees is super cool because you can one-shot workers, and they're so fast and so agile. It's actually really not too hard to micro this once you get the hang of target firing those workers down. Brings up his total worker count to 32. So let's check out this SCV count, 73 SCVs. Now keep in mind, you do not want to go this high necessarily in a very messy game. If you're both killing heaps of workers, maybe your 3rd gets denied a little bit, your 4th gets very delayed, you aren't really going to have a space for all these workers. But because Gumi was basically the one always controlling the pace of this game, Dark never really seriously committed to a counter pressure. Gumi got this 4th up exceptionally early. And because of that, he's able to just fully saturate it, build SCVs like a madman, and that's why he gets such a sick income here, and he gets this fast orbital transition and all of that going very early on. You can see his setup as well. He's got this Viking on the south watching for drops. He's still trying to clear up creep. He never lets that just spread across the map. And finally, we see these Banshees saying, yeah, we can kill Spore Crawlers one at a time really easily. We're Banshees. We do insane damage. And just snipes down 2 Spores, doesn't lose a Banshee. And he spots the Greatest Spy, and this is so huge because he is not ready for Broodlords. And at the same time, he spots a huge drop on the south side, but the transfuse on the Greatest Spy barely saves it, but it's okay because he does catch this drop. And this is more important. He doesn't want to let a whole lot of Roaches and Hydras into his base. He rotates the rest of his army down. His Vikings do shut it down. And he's going to lose like 3 Hellions and a Viking for 4 full Dropper Lords of Roach Hydra. And at this point, he's going to counter push. Is this a reaction? Is he like, oh, I just killed some army, let's go? Maybe a little bit, but realistically, we know what he's afraid of. It's that Greatest Spire. Gumi is saying, oh crap, I've got 18 siege tanks in my army. I've got, you know, 3 Vikings and a Raven in here. I do not have anti-Brood Lord yet. I have to push right here, right now, and I need to put the hurt on you. So he's going to push really decisively. He's scanning ahead. He sees that's not actually a very frightening Ravager Hydra force. He's like, you know what, I barely even need to siege up right now. Dark was really unprepared. Even though Dark manages to abduct a whole bunch of siege tanks there, now Gumi's sieged. Look at this spread. He's sieged up in range of 2 different bases. His siege tanks are going to blast down the 4th and the 5th of Dark. And he's just leapfrogging these tanks forward as quickly as possible. Behind this, he was starting a Raven transition. He's got 3 starports. He's building Widow Mines, Tunneling Claws, Thors, and he's going to start building a lot more Vikings and Ravens as soon as he takes a break from microing. So look at this trade. Damages the economy, kills a lot of Roaches, Hydras, Ravagers, really forces a trade. And the moment these Broodlords come out, Gumi's army looks kind of trash. It's like, I have a few Vikings, and the moment they go down, I just have siege tanks versus brood lords. As these Vikings get abducted here, he killed a few broods at the start with some good focus fire, but then he's like, oh god, get out of there. Save these siege tanks. He doesn't have an unlimited gas bank. In fact, he's already spent all his gas bank and he's down a little bit in supply. This broodlord timing is probably the scariest thing you face as a mech player. It's this moment where this big Thor tank army goes from being incredibly strong to being like, oh, is this really that good? So that's why it was very important for him to push right there. And I actually think maybe he should have pushed a little bit earlier, even if he didn't see the Greatest Buyer, because you kind of know you're giving Zerg more time to get more Vipers, potentially more Broodlords. And I feel like it's kind of interesting. You really do want to push into the Zerg. If you give the Zerg unlimited time, they can just destroy stuff. I was saying at the start, I myself have said Vipers just destroy tanks and Thors. They can just pull them over for free with Abduct, with Hydras. But you got to think about it. Vipers are one of the most expensive gas units in the game, 200 gas. And they can only use Abduct twice when they're maxed at energy. The Blinding Cloud has way reduced duration now. If you let a Zerg run over to your side of the map, grab a few units, run home, get more energy, run over to your side of the map, grab a few units, run home, then yeah, Zerg can basically kill your entire army for free, little by little. But you're going to see Gumi here, he really carried his momentum through and he understood the aggressive timings that you need to use. It's early game. Let's not give the Zerg freedom. Let's slow them down with that early harass, the Hellions, the Banshees. But then doing that very decisive tank Thor push before he hit the sort of expiry date for that army. Yeah, there were 3 Vipers out. Yeah, they abducted like 5 or 6 siege tanks. But when you've got 18 siege tanks, a bunch of Thors and Hellbats, losing just a few siege tanks doesn't matter. It's if you lose a few siege tanks and you're not pushing a base at the same time and then you just fall back, it was all for nothing. But Gumiho got 2 bases for that. He did really well. And in the hindsight of that, his income, well, the base is just finished, but his income for the last minute or two was actually double Darks. And let's go back just a little bit. I'll show you guys that actually, just very quickly. Give you guys the income graph and then we'll fast forward. Look at that. So he falls back. He's committing to heaps of Vikings. He's getting ship weapons now as well as the plating. More and more Thors in his composition because of obviously they shoot up. But he still mixes in some siege tanks. He doesn't want to be too weak against the ground army. And this is just fantastic play out of Gumi. He's still harassing with a single Banshee on the north. He was making sure there's no base up there. He's scanning the army. And this is, yeah, just a fantastic way to play here for the end game. More and more Vikings building 4 at a time. Just sick play. And we're going to see in just a moment, if we fast forward back to where we were. So Gumi is here, and he's clearing up that base finally. He's got a 5th, he's going to take a 6th. He's still harassing in the main with a Banshee as well. Really good Banshee movement. And at this point, he's going to say, okay, I'm maxed out again. I've got a decent Viking count now. I've still only got 1 or 2 Ravens, but I can start to add more. Let's scan. Oh, he's making more Broodlords. Yeah, I got enough Vikings. Let's do it. Swaps the Thors all into high impact payload here. You can see they're all pulling out those big artillery guns on their back that do more damage to single targets, so they can actually fight Broodlords pretty well. And he's like, all right, let's push in. Because he gives this army enough time, the Vipers will be able to pick away at his important units with Abduct, with Parasitic Bomb, with Blinding Cloud. You can see the Vipers here abducting out the Vikings, trying to whittle down the air army. But if he can use the tanks and Thors to cover the Vikings and take out the Hydras, and you notice his Vikings trying to snipe off the Broodlords, but they go forward, they go back. They go forward, they go back. He doesn't want to lose all those Vikings. And he knows if he gives more time, these Vipers are going to get more energy. But he's not giving that time to Dark. He's just shoving his way in relentlessly. We see here, those Vipers, as they arrive, units just disappear for free. But once you're in range of the Zerg's base, you just get screwed. And this is a situation I've been in a lot, guys. I've played Gumiho a lot on ladder over the last year. And he's been doing this sort of style of push for a long time. And I can tell you, it often feels like if he just gives you a little bit more time, you'll be able to hang on and win. And he never gives you that time. Literally never. Like, he is just every single game, he's like, no, I'm gonna kill you now. And you're like, just give me a little bit more time to get some more energy. And you'll be like, oh, I'm killing units for free. I'm abducting. But he's got great macro. The real challenge for Zerg, and the reason this works so well, is because the Zerg, to counteract this army with these very efficient units, if we look at it in just Zerg has the right answers, they're very immobile answers. Roaches, Hydras, Vipers, Broodlords. These units aren't fast. You really struggle to defend your bases from speed Banshees and from Hellions. Why don't you just build static, Pig? Think about it. We just saw Banshees come in, snipe down 2 Spore Crawlers like they were nothing. Even if you've got 3 or 4 Spines around a base, 8 Hellions running there, they're going to kill every single drone before the Spine Crawlers kill the Hellions. So trying to protect a large economy and have enough supply, especially when you've got things like Ravagers, which aren't very supply efficient in your army, Roaches from earlier in the game, it's very awkward for the Zerg to do that. And then the Zerg needs to try and get as many Vipers and Broodlords and those really efficient units as possible, but these cost so much gas. So the mixture of limiting the Zerg's economy in stage 1 with the pressure and continuing that throughout the entire game, stage 2 doing a big mech push before the Zerg can get enough of those efficient units and pushing in hard and fast rather than giving them a lot of time to react. And then following it up with stage 3, where you start to add in more Vikings and Ravens and add in, more just kind of robust army to actually combat the Sky Zerg army as well. Suddenly, Mech actually looks really good. And it's funny because there are points in the battles where Zerg does just completely crush a section of the Terran's army almost for free using those spells, using Broodlords. But it's a very momentum-based style where for the Zerg to get up that efficient answer to Mech, they sacrifice mobility, they can't really defend all their far bases, and they need to go back and get energy a lot of the time. So if you push hard and fast, if you harass a lot, as the Terran player, you almost end up like the Zerg in this game, where Gumiho's on 6 bases, Dark is barely rebuilding his 5th, and Gumiho can afford to be very inefficient. So if a Zerg plays a much more traditional Zerg player style, they're building Ultras and they're taking a billion bases and they've got like Ling Bane Ultra against Mech, well, you can play a lot more turtly, you can sit back. But with this classic Viper, Hydra, Broodlord sort of based army, you want to be the one who's attacking them, harassing them, and building a bigger economy. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's daily about how to make Mech work in Zerg vs Terran. I think it's cool to see it working against the best Zerg in the world. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about how you can crush Mech as Zerg. And to talk about that, we're going to talk about game 2 in this exact series. This was game number 1, where Gumiho does the exact same build and Dark makes it look way worse. But a big part of that is it's on a different map, a map which is much better for Dark's playstyle. So we're going to have a whole discussion about maps, about how to crush Mech, and especially how to defend all the mobile harassment of this style of Mech tomorrow. So that should be fun. That's about it for now, guys. We'll round up. Don't forget to hug a watermelon, kick a walrus, and of course, punch a cactus to the moon. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye and good night. Oh, don't forget to send in replays for ICYFAR, guys. YouTube description has all the information. Send in replays with cool micro moments. Do it.